So in this video, we're going to look very briefly at a reaction known as the Tollens oxidation. And while we won't be getting into a mechanism for this reaction, we're going to use it to talk about what this reaction was originally used for and how this reaction's use has changed greatly over the last 140 years. So this reaction, credited to Bernard Tollens back in 1882. Now, what the reaction does is it allows us to convert aldehydes into carboxylic acids. Now, it's not the only way to do it, and you may have, if you've learned about, for example, the Jones oxidation, then you may know that the Jones oxidation, chromium trioxide and sulfuric acid, will also, do something like this. In fact, that reaction, you may have learned, takes a primary alcohol first to an aldehyde, then to a carboxylic acid. But this reaction is done under much milder conditions. With the use of silver oxide, ammonia, and water to form a carboxylic acid. And also, interestingly, this reaction gives off, or precipitates out silver metal as the product. And so originally, this was what this reaction was widely used for. It turned out, before we had spectroscopy, if you wanted to determine if your reaction had worked, you often had to do some sort of chemical test to probe whether the functional group you were trying to make had been formed. And so the Tollens test was a really, really quick way to be able to do something like that. If you thought you'd made an aldehyde, you added this set of reagents to it, and if silver metal came out of the solution, then you could be fairly confident that yes, you had an aldehyde because your Tollens test had successfully converted it to a carboxylic acid. So these days, we don't really use chemical tests in the same way. They tend to be very, very inefficient, and they actually use up material that we don't necessarily want to use up. And so now the Tollens oxidation is more of just a process that allows us to convert an aldehyde into a carboxylic acid, but much of its history exists as a chemical test to indicate whether you had formed an aldehyde or not.